Okay, welcome very much, Robert. It's so good to welcome. Sorry we had all these confusions, but on this snowy day, it looks like we got past that blizzard. That was something else that just hit. And in the audience, welcome to the program. Guest is Robert Knight. Robert Knight is a radio station, WBAI producer and host of now the 5 o'clock Shadow Show. And not parenthetically, he's also the winner of the very prestigious Polk Award for investigative journalism. He's got a very interesting long life's experience behind him that we're going to talk about. And Robert, welcome so much. This is the first time we've had a chance. I'm really welcoming you to the set.
It's my greatest honor. It's like waking up in heaven, considering the many great people you've had on this show.
I'm in heaven. Okay, good. Thank you. Robert, could you please, this is the way we usually like to start. This is going to be the Robert Knight Hour in a very large sense, us interrelating. But could you share your background? Born, raised, a little of your education, and then we'll talk about your work. And we got a clip, a rather extensive clip that I think has some of the work of Barbara Trent, who is a dynamite videographer and so forth. But share your own background, please.
I was born in the northwestern part of North Carolina, in North Wilkesboro, where I had a very fortunate childhood. My family was close to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. I was always exposed to people of accomplishment, and I was never taught limits in terms of my own expectations.
Okay. Were they academically inclined, intellectually inclined? Were you encouraged intellectually and political activistically inclined?
They were educators and not explicitly in terms of politics, but a certain sense of justice, of right. You know, there was active segregation. Jim Crow when I was growing up. The house at one point during my childhood was attacked with watermelons being thrown through the window.
Wow.
And nevertheless, I feel that I was fortunate in that most of my education was at Catholic schools. So that provided a broadening of the social experience.
I would think
I remember that the first time I ever heard the N-word, I was walking to school, and a little white boy called me that, and I didn't know, so I called him one too.
How old? Would you have been like 5 or 6 young?
Yeah.
All 5-year-olds are gorgeous. They're just gorgeous. Like, anyway, go ahead. Yeah, right.
So I found that one can, with the proper support, the proper love, the proper social environment and political backing to have access to things, that one should maximize one's potential.
Okay, and around the dinner table there was discussion of things that were of social concern. It wasn't just
certainly.
all comparing washing machines or...
Oh, no. We talk about what was happening
human
with
affairs,
the civil rights movement,
Absolutely,
the dogs, the hoses, and such things.
Yeah. Okay, well, very good. I'm glad you had that kind of... That's important. I think the family setting is really important.
Well, that would...
What goes on around the dinner table, you know, might be more important even than the institutional...
Well, in terms of racism, that which does not kill you makes you mad.
Okay,
And one should never allow the injustice or the oppression of another person define who oneself is.
Yeah. Somebody said, who was it? A friend of mine, Trish St. Hill. We did a program with her. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the island of St. Vincent and the group of people that were on that island in the Caribbean. Their story, they were from Benin in the slave days, 17th century, and they made a mutiny on the ship and took it over.
Oh, yes.
They were slaves.
Absolutely.
The conditions of the slave trade in the Middle Passage was absolutely horrendous. I think it was probably worse in North America than anywhere else, I'm not sure, but they were on their way to St.
It was a peculiar institution.
Oh, yeah, it was horrible. But anyway, they took over they took over the ship and they went to St. Vincent and they celebrated, they got a name, the Menangros or something, people combination on that island, and they were never slaves. They took over and won, and I told them they ought to make a movie with Spielberg of that, with Denzel Washington playing the leading role of because Spartacus and so forth usually got shot down, people who tried to resist. But she had a thing, she said, life is 1% of what people do and 99% how you react to what other people do.
That's a beautiful thought.
I think there's something to that.
You remind me of the story of the Amistad and Cinque and that rebellion. And I just finished doing a radio documentary on the nobility of the people of Haiti, which was the first slave plantation in this hemisphere where an African slave group successfully rebelled and built an independent nation. It's called The Sweet Science of Racism in Haiti, and the inspiration that the history of the people of Haiti, despite the calumny, the degradation that most media puts it in terms of poverty and erosion of the ecology and so on, it brought tears to my eyes to see exactly that people can not be defined by their oppressors, that it's what you do in reaction to an injustice that truly defines character.
Well, that's true. I would like to think that, but also it's really hard when you're in a situation. It's hard to, it could be a cop-out of not doing something dangerous in the face of something that's overwhelming odds against you and history stacked against you. You know, it could be a way to cop out from taking action. I think. I don't know. It's a very important question how you deal with it. And how does the artistic community deal with the oppression? And we both respected Marshall McLuhan. Yeah. And he used to be a great scholar of Joyce. And Joyce was perhaps the greatest reader of the intellectual or conscious effects of technology and its evolution on consciousness itself. But he had James Joyce say, history is a nightmare of injustice from which I'm attempting to awaken, Ned Dedalus say. So it's been a constant history of injustice in terms of the future that was unfolding. So how to live in a world of injustice and internalize it, put up with the injustices in a muddling through kind of way, has been the story of mankind if you were imbued from the beginning with this kind of sense of elemental justice for all, including the ecology, which may be the requirement of the future that we're not yet measuring up to like we should. If you understand all that.
Well, yes, certainly the earth is full of examples of courage and liberation. And I think it's important to understand that everyone lives at a point directly above the center of the earth. And there is some sense, other than the gravitational core, that connects us all. And sometimes it seems to me that when someone is doing injustice, when I am being hurt by someone,
or somebody else, or the group is being hurt, even though you're not, perhaps.
Well,
that's a larger order.
It still diminishes me as a member of the population of humanity. And that's why one, as you were saying, cannot sit still for injustice. And sometimes when another person seems to be doing something to you, it may be a message to oneself about a weakness, a misunderstanding, and sometimes the behavior of other people is not always conscious. And so it's important to have a good center so that you can smite injustice, but never lose the humanity in stopping a person from doing a bad thing.
Well, if you can. If you have something systemic, it's hard for a citizen to know how to deal with systemic. If the situation is inherently unjust, if you were to take just an example of the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto, or Spartacus, or any of the things of slave, or even slave, it's very hard to resist when that resistance is going to result in mutilation, or castration, or killing of your child.
Pretoria.
Or all these, Pretoria.
Birmingham, Philadelphia, the ghetto. In each case,
it took
there
a lot
was
of courage.
A reaction against a systemic injustice.
And it comes... And
every day you get to vote.
Yeah, right. Every day you get to vote.
You get to vote.
How's that?
To vote against injustice.
By your actions?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. That's a good term. Is that trademarked? Do you have that trademarked?
It just occurred to me.
Oh, very good. Right here. It was coined right here. Every day you get to vote. Yeah, that's good. No, that's good. Yeah, that's a big issue and so forth, or where we stand. You've been doing radio for quite a long while. What did you do? Some education formal? I heard you say Catholic.
Yeah.
Were you in the hands of the Jesuits by any chance?
You know, I admired them.
I know.
I actually
intellectual
at one
rigor,
point wanted to become a Franciscan or a Jesuit, and I love the pantheism of the Franciscans, but I always thought that the Jesuits were cool because they were the CIA of the Vatican.
Right, they're intellectual rigor, man.
The knowledge, the power, and the secrets.
Yeah.
I majored in electrical engineering.
Did you really?
And did some additional studies in computer science and information theory.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked as a systems analyst.
Really?
I traveled and prevailed in that craft for a great many years from a young age. And
you did an engineering degree or something?
A BSE.
Did you really? Where?
Manhattan College.
Okay,
right here in Riverdale, Bronx, New York.
What got you there, do you think? It's mathematics?
Well, I'd gone to the flagship high school of the diocese, Cardinal Spellman High School.
Okay.
And
Good school? Good school?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Like Stuyvesant or
Yeah, it's
Bronx Science?
top of the pack.
Okay,
And
good.
both had Christian brothers, so I guess it was a natural transition from Spellman to Manhattan. And I just loved it. The day that I discovered a computer, I was in heaven.
When would that have been? Can you put a date on it?
No, I can't.
Okay, just rough. Could you put a decade on it?
70s.
Late 70s, maybe.
Yeah.
70s, yeah, which is coming.
And I just loved taking apart a puzzle. Back in the day, electricity and phone bills are sent out on punched computer cards.
I remember them.
And I learned through studying computing that if you do what they call an 11 punch, if you cut out a little square in one of the columns, that makes the number that it says you owe a negative number, and you send it back, and their computer would say that they owe you money.
Oh, wow. You discovered that, yeah?
So
well, that
computers...
could have been very practically significant.
Computers are a way of equalizing things.
Okay.
And so is the telephone. If you can speak properly into a telephone, you can make somebody on the other end do pretty much anything you want.
What you mean by voice intonation or by massive
Oh, just by
notes?
conversation.
If you're clever.
Well,
At manipulating other people's conscience, is that what you're saying?
Well, helping them to help you.
Helping them to... That'd be salesmanship. Is that what you're saying about? Yeah, but that...
According to my attorneys, I must answer yes.
I hope you battery of them with that kind of... No, I understand what you're saying, and also that thing about the computer, it's really changing everything, and we're at a time of really qualitative transformation. It's interesting you did computer science. You familiar with Kurzweil, Ray Kurzweil?
Oh, yes, sure.
Yeah.
And the synthesizers and the integration of art and computing.
Yeah.
Beautiful work.
He also writes philosophically, The Age of Spiritual Machines, on the implications of the computer. And that's what Joyce was on about. That's what McLuhan did. We used to visit with him each spring back in 68 to 71. And he allowed us how we could sit in on the class. But Joyce was a great reader of the implications of the various levels of technology of communication upon consciousness. And he said the medium is the message. The medium by which we communicate is far more important than the message that we pay all the attention to, if you understand. And they're incorporated, they're encapsulated within advances of new systems. So the old medium becomes the content of the new.
That brings us to one of the great issues of justice that we are facing today, with the concept of total information awareness, the governmental attempt to catalog all data of all transactions of all people all the time. And one of the inferences from the theory behind that is that you don't need to know what somebody said on the telephone. You don't actually have to bug the conversation. If you know person A called person B, and 3 minutes after that, person B called person C, and if that happened several times, then you can infer some association between person A and person C.
Right, okay.
And we are in a state today, Harold, where Data valence is...
data valence, yeah.
Yeah, the warehousing of information about what a person does is threatening the very liberties upon which not only this country, but humanity is based.
Right.
And there's two things to it. One, having a storehouse of information means that invidious people then can later on selectively extract from it in order to paint a false picture of a person or to engage in malicious prosecution. The other part of it is that there's an asymmetric collection of data by the government and quasi-government privatized agencies. The other part of it is we're seeing something, even as we speak, during the WikiLeaks phenomenon, where there are active efforts to prevent people from accessing the electronic commons, the internet. It began as a Pentagon project, but became a common carrier, a means of commerce, communication, expansion of
the internet
information.
itself. The internet
Yes.
itself. It was ARPANET,
there's legislation from Senator Lieberman up in Connecticut and others to have a shut-off switch for the internet. There are attempts to prosecute people for accessing certain kinds of data. And just as computing has made us smarter, there are countervailing forces trying to use them to make us dumber. And we may see a day when it's not so easy to do the kind of thing you do with this show or what one does with the internet.
It's interesting that they cut off, or a country like China, where they had to cut off Google, or they had and I see now Mr. Facebook, what's his name, Zuckerberg, visited China talking to the people there because they have an ability to control what the people can see. They had a thing on television, Frontline, where they had university students in China were not even aware of what was called at Tiananmen. You know, Tank Man who stood up to the tank?
Sure.
There was a picture, and they didn't even know who he was in China. I mean, how effectively
well, if you
they
look
can...
at the planet like a brain, it's sort of like an aneurysm. It's sort of a disease, a blackout of certain pieces or parts of information, and this cannot be good for humanity. And I guess a corollary of governmental repressive operations to limit our information is that we're becoming instupided. And part of that is done by creating an elite class of school marms, of so-called security experts, of people whose basic approach to humanity is fear, jealousy, and greed. And as a result,
like the banking community.
You have the crisis at the airports where people are...
Isn't it absurd?
You know, they call it the Transportation Security Administration, but I call it the TS agency because that's what they tell you when you come.
TS?
TSA, the TS agency.
The TSA, oh, TS.
Because when you complain, that's what they say to you.
Tough, manure. Yeah, TM. Yeah, that's true, and everything's funny. And you're going to be able to have that in where they're going to be trying to get absolute security. People are going to start hiding things in body parts. They can't do the scanning, can't do that, so grandma's going to have to jump out of the wheelchair and do like you used to have to do when you wanted to go in the swimming pool. Yeah, I mean, it becomes absurd. It's great fodder for the comedians.
Who was it who said that one who trades liberty for security deserves neither?
I'm not sure who it was, but whoever it was pretty smart. And we got this thing. But on the other hand, then also we're at a time, we've got larger issues, it seems to me, if I will. We got to get to 5 o'clock Shadow and BAI and all your work. You're doing great work and everything. And the Pacifica Network has been such a grounding institution nationally for so long and everything. But you're getting to a thing where they can have analogs with other things. Like, for instance, the human organism, it's dangerous to make a distinct, but the human organism has approximately 100 trillion cells that makes up the system called Robert Knight or Harold Channer. 100 trillion, that's a staggering number. Every cell matters. Every cell is in communication with every other cell. And there is an efficiency that comes from that. and it's called systems, and you studied systems and so forth. So there's something to be said for there being, at some point, perhaps one when there is a trusting, appropriate way of organizing world society, rather than one that's predicated on principles that we may have to subsume in a more liberated order in these days. There are efficiencies that come from having a systems understanding of a system, or a paradigm shift might be too narrow. That's one aspect of an overall thing, where it's a paradigm, punctuated equilibrium transformation.
A paradigm doesn't.
Yeah, do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? That
yes.
Having good information is perhaps necessary for the system to be effective in a way.
Exactly.
You understand that?
And security is a way of limiting the possibilities. A man named Gurdjieff wrote a book called Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson.
Ospinsky also.
And I was very much taken by a line from the book where Beelzebub in the spaceship is explaining to his grandchild, son, despite what people say, the human brain is a device for limiting information.
That's interesting. It is true. You do. You couldn't handle all of the full tilt boogie sensory and things that would be available to us.
I was just thinking about what you're saying about 100 trillion connections, and
100 trillion cells.
Cells.
That includes bacteria in the gut and stuff.
Exponentially more
but
connections.
But it's a staggering number.
Well, 100 trillion. The way I bracket that number, 100 trillion. That's how many dollars the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and Pakistan and Iran are going to cost when they're finally done.
That much?
Yeah.
I see Mr. Stiglitz
they're already approximately $10 trillion.
Well, Mr. Stiglitz says $3 trillion for Iraq.
Oh, they've said more recently.
More?
Yeah.
Recently? He's put that up?
The last time they spoke on it was over 6.
Really? For Iraq
alone? The ultimate
alone?
cost of the Iraq-Afghanistan wars.
Oh, Iraq and Afghanistan is there. Yeah, it seems pretty absurd. But I was talking about systems in a way. And a system, every biological system, and that anything, I wake up every day and I think that anything exists is a miracle of a sort. Because as far as we don't know anywhere else where there is life. Carl Sagan, SETI, looking for it, probability theory saying there must exist elsewhere.
The interaction of the planets is life.
Life. I'm talking organic process, understood within a materialistic context, not some sort of spiritual thing.
What we call visible light is from a very narrow slice of the spectrum of the radiation of the sun.
Okay.
We consider ourselves to be the great creations of nature. But in point of fact, we're simply we're simply artifacts of the solar radiation. Photosynthesis, all of that is based on that narrow little slice of solar spectrum. And as this planet and the others orbit the sun, the conservation of angular momentum means that the center of the solar system is not in the sun, but the sun is also a planet. It's actually orbiting the so-called barycenter. You could think of it as center of gravity to be simple. And when the outer massive planets are kind of aligned, it's a big pull that way, and the sun has to respond to that with an equal and opposite rotational motion. So the positions of the planet actually shake and churn the center of the sun. This is related to the sunspot cycle, which is approaching a maximum now. And so the conditions on other planets actually change the way the sun operates and affect us here on Earth.
Okay, that's interesting.
And I posit that the solar system is itself a living entity, one that has organs that we might call planets, or the solar plasma, the electronic bloodstream of the sun. I'm not sure what life is, but I think it's more than just us.
Well, not just us, but it's an organic process. Well, that's interesting. I like very much Lovelock and the idea of Gaia. Seeing the Earth as an organism, in a certain sense, in an organic process. But I don't know of any other that we've been able to discover
I interviewed him on Earthwatch.
You
I
did.
do a show called Earthwatch.
Yeah, maybe that. So he's a great guy, it seems to me. And Lynn Margulis, the great,
Yes.
and Dorian Sagan, the son of Carl Sagan and Lynn Margulis, has written really well, Dazzle Gradually on Biology and Understanding Science. She's very concerned that science itself and the process is, the scientific process is being questioned because it's being politicized, which is very dangerous, okay? Anyway, you interviewed him, and we got to get the segue over. You did a program, it used to be called something else in the old days, and now you do 5 o'clock shadow, radio, WBAI, and talk, maybe we can segue into that.
Sure. I came to WBAI by a series of accidents. I had grown up as a child listening to the radio station, and I was taken by its variety, its eclecticism, its subversion, its culture,
its critique,
its libertine culture.
It's calling truth to power, which is something that human consciousness might have a higher order
During
of
difficult
activity.
days, in certain neighborhoods, I would leave the house and leave the radio on WBAI because if it was on a music station, somebody breaking in might think, they just left the radio on. But the flow of programming was so different, you never knew what would be next. So it sounded like there were actually people in the house. So it was a burglar alarm.
A protective burglar.
That's what drew me to the station. I came there at the end of the 70s.
Okay.
And quite by a series of accidents. As I mentioned, I had been working as assistant analyst and doing innovative things in direct marketing.
Right.
And I just got tired of that. I got tired of hungry businessmen calling me Bob. And I had one assignment with a promotional giveaway that involved South African Krugerrands.
Oh, boy.
Well, that's when I came to my limit in that business. And I decided I wanted to become a reporter. I wanted to become a journalist because that was a golden passport to all the world. There are very few professions where you can be anywhere and see anything.
That's right.
And so I came to WBAI and started producing some programs. And in a very short time, I was asked to become the weekend news director.
Wow, that's a great responsibility.
Not long after that, I became the news director.
Is that for BAI? No, it's a network, Pacifica Network.
Pacifica
is network nationally?
A listener-sponsored network of 5 radio stations. It was created by the Pacific Foundation by pacifist named Lou Hill.
Lou Hill, God bless him,
And
out of Berkeley.
it has a mission of finding the differences among cultures, the sources of antagonism and misunderstanding, and hoping to broach them, to eliminate the breaches among people, and to independently seek out more truth than propaganda.
Right. That's really called for. Are they connected in terms of programming, or each of the 5 has their own individual boards or own
each station has its own local flavor. We have stations, well, of course, WBAI here in New York. WPFW in Washington, KPFT in Houston, KPFA in the Bay Area, and KPFK in LA. And there are some common things. We used to have, and hopefully will again, have our own national news department. But there are some programs that are intershared among the stations with the local autonomy of programming for each one. And I've got to say that BAI has certainly stepped up to the plate in recent times. There was an erosion of audience for a few years that our survival as a station and as a network required us to broaden our appeal and to have more people directly listen and support. And I'm happy to say that we're on that path now. We've seen some very good signs of that. And I think the station is in a renaissance, a rebirth, and we just want to serve as many people as we can with pride and without prejudice.
And it's very easy. Or if you're looking for things where there are some problems, a lot of problems in the world. And various people have different takes on it. There will be some women who will be very concerned with prejudice. There's race. People who are being,
there's a wretched history of discrimination.
Absolutely, all the way through. So
Violence.
it's not, there's all kinds of things that could be done. And then are you connecting into, or is there any connecting into the internet and the computer developments in terms of communication with Pacifica?
Well,
and how are
yes,
you relating to that?
To a certain mandatory extent. We stream our programs on the internet. We have a web page with their schedule and so on and so forth.
So it can be heard.
So we are doing the nominal, to that. People say that we should be doing more. Facebook. I'm a little leery of Facebook because everything you put into it is a permanent record. But I completely agree with cyberneticizing, with Twittering and using the modern forms of social media. But I say that with a caveat. Broadcast is the unique communications phenomenon where the government cannot hear you listening. With the internet, everything you do is tracked. You cannot be on the internet unless you're registered with a service provider, which means there's an audit trail of everything that's done.
That is true.
So broadcast radio is the one and only way that a group of people can simultaneously have a thought or a political mobilization or
and
philosophical insight.
Without being snooped on.
Nobody can hear you hearing.
Nobody can hear you, but you're broadcasting to the world. It could be easily recorded.
No, nobody can hear you hearing.
Oh, I see who's hearing.
Yeah.
So they can't trace that. I see. Well, that's,
okay, there's
interesting.
always an intrinsic element of the live, real-time element of broadcast radio is a different and I think a noble thing that should not be substituted with the internet. It should be augmented, but the internet will never be a replacement because you're bound to a computer. A broadcast is free roaming. Radio is better than television because you can listen to the radio while you're doing other things. Television, wants your eyes to watch it, and you lose information if you don't watch it and listen only to the soundtrack. So I think that radio is a very important phenomenon, medium, and that's what brought me to
WBAI.
In the 80s. I and my partner, Dennis Bernstein, and some others, created a show called, and this is what you were asking about earlier, Contragate.
That's right. Oh, okay.
Contragate, which was later named Undercurrents. And we were there on the ground floor with the Iran-Contra affair.
It was amazing. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
And during the course of that, I ended up being able to travel to 5 of the 7 continents. I met Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi in his own house after it had been shot up by U.S. warplanes.
86.
I went to Colombia, to the mountains in Pita, to Bogota, and to Cali, and saw some of the downstream effects of United States foreign policy.
Right.
I was in Managua, Nicaragua, and I went to Panama, where I covered what was happening in the years leading up to the U.S. invasion of 1989, and that's the work that got me the Polk Award.
Congratulations. That's a very prestigious award. That's very, very good you did that. I congratulate you on that. And in fact, this might be a time when we might segue over to a clip that we have.
Yes.
Because Barbara Trent, I think we're familiar all with Barbara. She's a really good. And the Iran-Contra affair was really an intense thing that was going on at the time. I remember it so well. And she won awards for a piece that she had done.
It's an Oscar-winning film, The Panama Deception.
Right, The Panama Deception. It was really good. And how is it that these things go on and they just seem to, history just keeps going and subsumes, and there's never any consequence for the kind of things that governments do in the name of some national interest that they assert is part of God's way of doing things. Or so. Do you understand? Why is it that they can get away with so much as long as they stay powerful?
The more you and I do our work, the more people just say no.
I beg your pardon?
The more you and I do our work, the more people say no. to that kind of policy. We must not be so self-aggrandizing as to think the results will be instantaneous, but there is growth.
You have a positivistic view of the evolution, that things are getting better. I guess that is true. I think that too, but it's sometimes wondering, when is there ever going to be, you know, vision that's going to inform the whole process? And are we at a time where that is absolutely now, like in evolution, you have steady state, and then there's a quickening, and then, or a birth canal experience, then there's what they call, in evolutionary terms, punctuated equilibrium, and the new appears, the species appears. We're here 200,000 years. We're coming to the end of our experience, the Homo sapien, 10,000 generations, and there's going to be a new relationship to the cosmos, and we don't have systems that can deal. Nietzsche once said, the future influences the present as much as the past.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether this is the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning.
Well, whatever it is, it's the time of qualitative transformation when the if I may, we'll get to Barbara's thing in your clip.
Let's do that.
But anyway, when you get to the point where on one side of an equation, the extension of consciousness in the form of technology and tools, the leading edge of which has been, for most of the human civilized society, been at the service of the political power in weapon systems that gave them an advantage to conquer others and not be conquered, have now reached a point where apparently from the modeling since about 1970, they have now become species lethal. That is, unlike history where we've spent time conquering each other and stealing from others and all the rest of it. And then on the other hand, there are things from Fuller, who both admire, all intellectuals I think admire, World Game and other things, that we very well may have transcended material scarcity in terms of our abstract technologically augmented algorithms and things. Scarcity is an ontologic reality for the human society with an appropriate ecological order. These things are never mentioned, never coming up as a context for which our decisions and our institutional structures are set. It's a challenge before us, and it's very discouraging that we seem not to have any vision. The intellectuals are falling down on the job.
The war you speak of, I think, comes from two motivations. So one of them is xenophobia. And the other, and I think much of the planetary history can be understood as a process with the issues of resource allocation. Who's got the food and the berries, the cattle,
well, it's economics.
And the invasion that follows in order to get them.
Everything changes.
The gold, the diamonds, you know.
No, yes, and that's it. The resources are all here 200,000 years when we appeared in the evolution. The resources, the knowledge of how to do it and the consequences of extended technology have reached a point now where we apparently can wipe out our species. That should be on the banner headlines of every newspaper, every news organization. It should be tracking, it should be made clear. We have weapons that if they're unleashed in some xenophobic kind of existential challenge to one political group over another or something, as they keep talking, it would mean now, apparently since about 1970, unlike as recently as the Second World War, well, we were impotent.
And then the more important... But I just do not believe the name of this planet is Jonestown.
I don't know what that means. That's suicide.
Yes.
Well, but that we wouldn't have any decision in that, and it wouldn't have anything to do with rational. It would be something irrational being launched, and it wouldn't have anything to do. And it isn't like some group killing themselves or doing something like they could do, they've been able to do. It would be one that would envelop, and it would have to be something that would unleash the ungodly power of the United States of America in some existential response to something irrational that's going on.
As in Panama in 1989.
Which might get us back to the film that we were trying to introduce, but you're too damned interesting, I'm sorry. Anyway, I think this is a time of qualitative transformation on the order of speciation, that we're coming into a new relation. We're either going to liberate the entire Homo sapiens species and not have the injustice that they grow. There's more concentration of wealth and ownership than there was in 1789 France. In this country and around the world, and the trends are there, and the ideas of how to organize things are not yet properly in front of the decision makers and so on. But that's another issue. But Panama Deception was the time where there was some very, very very, very negative things going on. And we got a clip, right? That would help. And you
this
were
is from
involved
the
with
Panama
that.
Deception.
Okay, and we got to run it. It's about 9 minutes, if I'm not mistaken.
And in it, you'll see some guy talking about the geography of the invasion.
The invasion of Panama.
Yeah.
Okay, we're talking with Robert Knight. He's a program extraordinaire Polk winner, and we're going to run a clip now, and it's about the Panama Deception, a film by Barbara Trent. It might go for about 9 minutes, but it'll be good. So let's see if we can't run that now, then we're coming back. Robert Knight's our guest, and let's run that clip now if we can, then please, Willie. Okay.
About the invasion of Panama remains hidden from most Americans. Those who have studied the official accounts have discovered many contradictions and have arrived at disturbing conclusions.
I have studied everything that the president has said as to reasons why he ordered the invasion.
This morning,
and none of those things singly or collectively makes any legal, moral, or constitutional sense.
One of the reasons for the invasion was to take the wimp image off President George Bush. He had had the what now seems to be the necessary blooding of a United States president to show his forcefulness and his machismo. This was a chance for the military to show what it could do.
if they kill an American Marine, that's real bad. And if they threaten and brutalize the wife of an American citizen, sexually threatening the lieutenant's wife while kicking him in the groin over and over again, this president is going to do something about it.
When he would say that the loss of American life was the last straw, sure, there must be something we could have done. Certainly, there must have been papers we could have filed. We could have gone to the World Court. We could have gone to the United Nations or maybe the Organizations of American States. But invade a country because of this? It's absolutely ridiculous.
The excuse that the invasion was to protect American lives is the one that's always given. The fact is there are 35,000 American citizens there, and none of them were in any danger. I was there 3 weeks before the invasion. There's simply no evidence, and I don't think the administration has ever bothered to even give any evidence to that statement.
The goals of the United States have been to safeguard the lives of Americans, to defend democracy in Panama.
Then President Bush said we had to go to restore democracy in Panama. How in the world do you restore that which has never existed? Panama has never been a democracy since we created Panama for our own purposes in 1903. And all we did was go down to restore American control and dominance in Panama.
The new government installed by the invasion was headed by the U.S.-backed candidates from the aborted national election, Endara, Calderon, and Ford. Hours before the invasion, they were taken to a U.S. military base where they were sworn in as the president and vice presidents. But the new government has enjoyed little popular support within Panama. Anti-government demonstrations occur regularly, and there have been numerous attempts from within the Panamanian police force to seize military control of the government. U.S. troops were mobilized several times to crush these insurrections.
Every time there's a crisis, the U.S. military takes over. They give orders, they subordinate that military because they don't trust that military force. The conflict is still there. The oligarchy knows that if the United States were not there, they could not rule this country.
But President Endara minimizes the significance of America's military occupation in Panama.
I think we are very normalized now. We practically have no occupation at all, practically. You don't see them in the streets. I don't see them in Panama. However, there are a few here and there, but is not really an occupation.
Of course, he's not going to say that that Panama is occupied. In fact, he might not even call it an invasion. It wasn't his kind that were killed or massacred. He lives in the nicer area, in the oligarchical area. And, you know, his interest was protected. He's not running Panama. He's a puppet of the U.S. government. The U.S. government is running Panama. They're running all of the ministries in Panama. He's only abiding by what he's told to do.
The Bush administration claimed that another reason for the invasion was to remove Noriega in order to stem the flow of drugs into the United States. But according to a U.S. General Accounting Office report, cocaine traffic through Panama may have doubled in the 2 years following the invasion. There's also considerable evidence that key members of Panama's new government, including President Endara, have been tied to the drug trade through banks and front companies that launder drug money.
The involvement of the Panamanian economy as a whole in drug trafficking, arms running, various questionable banking practices, in fact, involve most of the Panamanian elite, involve most of the people who now run this new U.S.-approved Panamanian government.
Endara and Ford, we all know, and Panamanians know, that they are the real drug traffickers. They have been, because Panama have had an history of the oligarchy being involved in drug trafficking.
In the years preceding and throughout the invasion, the U.S. government and the major media consistently portrayed Manuel Noriega as America's most hated and evil enemy.
General Noriega became a mythic figure. There was an attempt to personify in Noriega all that was evil. It was very interesting that when General Noriega, when his office was captured, we discovered the red pajamas, the voodoo equipment, and the alleged cocaine that he was using, and the pornographic pictures in his desk. Now, I happened to have been in Chile with the United Nations at the time of the overthrow of President Allende. And it's interesting that that same desk appeared in Chile with the pornographic pictures, the red pajamas, and the cocaine.
The whole propaganda against him was to build up a pretext in order to invade Panama and to say we invaded Panama because of Noriega. I don't know how Americans can be so stupid to believe this. I mean, how can you be so stupid? Like, for example, at one time, they had Noriega at gunpoint. They could have taken Noriega then, but the Americans didn't want Noriega. What they really wanted is to destroy the Panamanian army in order to do with the treaties what they wanted, which is what's happening now.
Although the U.S. government's reasons for the invasion made no mention of eliminating the Panamanian Defense Forces, U.S. officials later admitted that destroying the PDF was a central part of the plan.
It was not only Mr. Noriega, but his accomplices and underlings who stood for a reprehensible government at the time, and therefore you had to take down not only Mr. Noriega, but take down the elements of his supporting entity in order to reduce the PDF to nothing.
One of the objectives of the invasion, main objective, was to destroy the PDF. Why? The treaty, the Panama Canal Treaty, it stated clearly that the year 2000, Panama will be responsible for the security, the safety of the canal. To be responsible for the safety of a nation, you need to have an army. The elimination, the liquidation of the PDF means the extension, the continuity of the United States present as the only military force in our nation, which historically is the United States position.
Lo que ellos realmente están buscando es quedarse en Panamá What they really want is to stay in Panama after the year 2000, and that is what they have achieved. To destroy the Panamanian Defense Forces, to impose a government complacent with U.S. interests, and to make Panama the control center for all of Latin America.
The invasion sets the stage for the wars of the 21st century in South America. The 2,000-mile invasion from Washington to Panama City took place primarily with bases from the United States. The essential value of the Southern Command is to give another 2,000 miles of intervention capability, which takes us right into the heart of the Andean coca-producing region, where the wars of the next decade are entirely likely to take place.
Okay, yeah. All right, that's really interesting. That's really good. Man, I spent 2 years in Bolivia. I know that because I got a feeling for that. That's really interesting, really interesting. Well done, and thank you for that. And thank you, Barbara Trent. Yeah.
I wanted to include that because I know that you are a doctor of geographical politics.
Well, none of the geography. I did geography because you could be interested in everything. I think there should be a university, a university department of everything, because everything is united, and it's a divide and conquer thing where people become into specialization. It's intellectual divide and conquer. I think that's a major issue.
Which is an analog of exactly what we began speaking about, the separation of people, whether through economics, race, geography, or otherwise.
Well, yeah, and if you get the best minds coming along so specialized out, they're tunnel visioned, and they can't think about the whole. There's no department of everything or systems thinking at a large scale like Fuller and some of the other people that were there. But that's very interesting, and I was interested not only in political geography, I'm interested in everything. So you want to be interested in things in a system where geography you can get away with it without being specialized, which runs against the course.
It's defining the war in Afghanistan, the Khyber Pass, the access, therefore, the political treaties that have to be made with Tajikistan and northern places so they can move the fuel in that burns up more gas than anything else on the planet. Geography is,
well, geography is very comprehensive. You got that in history, you got a lot. You have to get to astrophysics to get into the thing like that. But anyway, that's a side issue. And I could go into it. It's very interesting. The Aymara Nation's a very foundational culture for the Andean area, fourth of the major places where civilization developed, but that's another issue and everything. But congratulations on that and on the work and Barbara Trent for following that. That was an amazingly audacious thing. I see in the Times there is now a thing apart to make the Panama Canal it's going to be able to accommodate ships 3 times the size of the current ones, which we're talking about, and they're going to expand, widen it and deepen it, and 3 times, and the improvement in, what do you call it?
Container throughput.
Yeah, container throughput.
You know, there was an alternate plan
to
dig and dredge Lake Nicaragua, which was an alternate location that was considered for a canal.
Yeah.
You know, we've been speaking about the earth and about people, societies, and cultures and the uniting of them. And, Harold, I mean, your work is part of that. And I just want to say that I'm very proud to hopefully be doing some of that work at WBAI and at the Pacifica Radio Network.
I'm really impressed. I got stuff from you. What you're doing is just consistently good. And I congratulate you on that work. We should be in steady communication with each other.
Well, our manager, Bertold Reimers, and program director, Tony Bates, Public Affairs Director Kathy Davis, and many others of the staff have been working very hard to streamline the programming, make it more listener-friendly, more accessible, a more coherent flow. And we've been seeing good results.
Yeah, good.
And both in the income and in the audience, bump up in the ratings. And I'm just tickled and humbled and overworked and frightened to have the opportunity to be a part of that with a new show called 5 O'Clock Shadow.
Yeah, it comes out at 5 o'clock, I would take it.
I forget what time. But, some people thought that the name was male-centered because they think 5 O'Clock Shadow exists. But no, 5 O'Clock Shadow is what surrounds us all. at that hour.
5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yes. And the shadows are what surrounds us.
You're right, that's right. I hadn't thought of that, yeah.
And the purpose of the show is it's got a variety format, but it is an investigative news magazine.
Right, we need that, yeah.
And we're trying to bring some light into the shadows of government operations, of social injustice, and sometimes even have a little fun while we're doing it.
That's good. I think fun is a great idea. And so, you like WikiLeaks and Assange and all that?
I think Julian Assange is the current incarnation of Prometheus.
Oh, wow, okay.
He has brought fire down from the secret protocols of the State Department and of the behavior of, or the divergence between what we think is being done for us and what is truly being done in our name. I think the increase of popular intelligence reduces the harm that can be done secretly. If Americans of good heart and ethics knew the injustices that were done to other countries, other peoples, populations, whether it be Palestine, South Africa, or around the world, then we ourselves would bring an end to that behavior and thereby reduce the resentment on another side of the world that may end up with a plane flying into a building. So actually, the increase of information can serve to reduce the sources of enmity.
Enmity, and also, I went right to Dorothy and the dog, pulling the curtain behind the guy with the Wizard of Oz, and that things are done in secret, and things are done in a way that they say they need that in order to be able to function. And you say enmity is that. What worries me is that we do not have, collectively. Buckminster Fuller said, Earth came without an operating manual. If you have a computer, you get it out, and the terms of it are understood, and that this fits here and this fits there. We don't have a system in place adequate to what the future now requires. We've been able to muddle through for 200,000 years. As Asimov said, this is the defining generation of the Homo sapien experience on Earth. So the thing is that we might get global warming, we might get some sort of a thing shown or something, but what we don't have is an operating manual that is based upon our understanding of the ontologic reality that is relevant to how you're going to have a world, rather one that is with slavery underlying it in terms of the mass of the people, but liberated. And that's an entirely as real as the destructive capability. It wouldn't be just enmity, it would be something that would lead to the destruction of the entire species. That's a different ballgame. And also that we may have the ability to liberate and to have liberated henceforth for all generations the material scarcity things that they've been fighting over by and large, including metaphysical capability of utilizing the natural resources that have always been here.
When love steers our stars, then peace will rule the planet.
Well, love would be